Hello! Is it working?
Oh yeah.
Cool. I noticed in the other one it was a little dark. So, let's get a little more light in here. Can we pull the left side there just to open the shades?
Huh?
There you go. That'll help a little bit. Okay. So we're on page 166. You should all be on that page. And we're studying organic chemistry. Organic chemistry is the study of large molecules. And why do we study large molecules? Because that's what living things are made of. And this is biology class. It's the study of life. Now do you see? You ever wonder what you're made of? What this is?
Now I know.
Made of organic molecules.
Never ever wondered that.
And all organic molecules have something in common. They all have carbon. Okay? And they all have hydrogen. Carbon and hydrogen. If you see a molecule that has both carbon and hydrogen in it, it's an organic molecule. That's the definition of an organic molecule, having both carbon and hydrogen. So, let me write a formula up here, and you tell me if it's an organic molecule.
Yes.
What's an organic molecule have to have?
Hydrogen and carbon.
Carbon and hydrogen. Okay, tell me if this is an organic molecule.
Yes.
Yes. CH4.
Yep.
Yes. It's got carbon and hydrogen. See? It's called methane. Did you know that?
Yeah.
What about this? Is this an organic molecule?
No.
No, it's not.
No, it doesn't have hydrogen. What about this? Is this an organic molecule?
Yes.
No.
No.
Nope. Doesn't have carbon. Do you see?
Do one more. Do one more.
One more. What is it? Is this an organic molecule?
No.
So, if a question said, which of the following are organic? A, B, C, or D?
A.
Okay, we'll see if you get that on the next test.
I'm gonna get it.
Huh? So what's the deal with carbon? Oh, by the way, that's called methane, carbon dioxide, ammonia, and water.
I knew all of
They
it.
all have names. The deal with carbon is important because it can form large molecules. Because it's got 4 electrons in its outer level. And having 4 electrons in its outer level allows it to share those electrons with 4 other atoms.
Yeah.
It's the only atom that can do this. Sort of, besides silicon and a couple other things. But carbon's the only atom that's in any abundance that can form 4 bonds. And because of this, it'll form really big molecules.
Yeah.
You can take a carbon atom and attach it to another carbon atom.
Yep.
And attach each of those to more carbon atoms. And then on the other side, attach to another carbon atom and a hydrogen. And attach some oxygens. And end up forming a big molecule. And if you'll notice in my drawing here, each carbon has 4 bonds. Can you see that? That carbon has 1, 2, 3, 4. The little line stands for a chemical bond, a covalent bond.
But they would die.
Look at that big molecule. What's that molecule called? It's called C1, 2, 3, 4, 5, C5.
H13.
H
13.
2, 4,
12, dude.
H12. Oh,
Blown the ground.
Oh,
interesting. It has a name. It's called pentanol. And the reason why I know that is because I took organic chemistry and I learned how to name these things. Thank you. But look at this.
I would say that's a branched molecule.
Sometimes molecules can form straight lines, and each circle stands for a carbon.
Yeah. What's going on?
Carry on.
What's going on?
So if you have all the carbons in a straight line, we call that a straight chain molecule. If you have it branched, the carbons branched in different ways, that's a branched molecule. And sometimes they form rings.
A ring
The ring molecule.
Geniuses.
Now they've left off the hydrogens here. They aren't showing the hydrogens that are bonded to those carbons, but wherever you see a carbon, know that there are 4 bonds coming off of it. Carbon always forms 4 bonds and can then form larger molecules. Here are some examples of some ring molecules formed by carbon. And we call any large molecule like this a polymer.
Oh, the heck?
Well, I'll tell you what. I'll come back to the word polymer later. Let's look at page 168.
What about carbohydrates?
Yeah, that's what we're doing now.
Protein.
That's what we're doing now. Now, it turns out that these organic molecules come in 4 different types that you're going to have to know. Carbohydrates.
Go, baby.
And sometimes we call carbohydrates, there's kind of a slang name for it. Carbohydrates are also called sugars.
Or
What
protein.
Sugars.
I call them.
And then, let's try not to just shout out random things. Lipids. Lipids are also commonly known as fats. You may have heard them called fats before. And then there are proteins, which we're going to talk about tomorrow. Proteins. And finally, nucleic acids.
My favorite.
That's the only one I know.
If you've ever heard of DNA, that's a nucleic acid. 4 types of organic molecules. 1, 2, 3, 4. These are molecules that have carbon and hydrogen, and often other things too, but always carbon and hydrogen. They come in 4 major groups. Yes?
Are lipids like the good kind of fats? You know what like good kind of fats that we have to have? Or they
Good fats versus bad fats.
Like fish
Any
oil.
fats are lipids. Some of them are good and some of them are bad, and I'll show you the good ones and the bad ones.
What?
I like to take
Like,
fish oil.
isn't that like-
Example of a good fat. What do you mean?
She's talking about unsaturated versus saturated, I think, is what you're talking about.
Isn't that what they do?
And I'll show you that when we get to that.
Is saturated bad fat?
Yeah.
Saturated would be the bad.
Okay.
But they're all classified as lipids.
Yes, any fat.
Can you call carbohydrates carbs?
Yes, you could.
You also call sugars.
Okay,
I've never called it.
so let's see the makeup of a carbohydrate. Carbohydrates, the simplest structure of a carbohydrate is usually a ring. A ring formation where the carbons connect to each other, but they form like a hexagon or a pentagon. And we call one of the simplest formations glucose. And glucose is often represented in a ring like that. And if you'll notice, look at the atoms, the carbon atoms, they all have 4 bonds. See this one right here. 1, 2, 3, 4. And so this makes a structure that I'm going to represent with one of these. I want you to pretend one of these is a glucose. Okay?
Alright.
Bam. There we go. Now, we have a name for any structure that consists of a single ring. A single ring carbohydrate has a name that you're going to have to memorize. And by the way, these names are hard, and we'll practice them and work on them. But try to remember, a single ring carbohydrate is called a monosaccharide.
That's what I was going to guess.
A monosaccharide consists of 1 ring, and one type is called glucose. Glucose is an example. Glucose is the sugar that's floating around in your blood. There are these trillions and trillions of these things floating around in your blood, and they're used by your cells for energy.
Yep.
If you're tired right now, probably means your blood is a little bit low in glucose.
Maybe you didn't get enough sleep last night.
Could be. There's some other ones. Fructose, that's fruit sugar. And ribose is a type of sugar found in a lot of molecules. But these are all monosaccharides. A monosaccharide is a single ring. Can you say the word monosaccharide? Let's do it on 3. 1, 2, 3. Monosaccharide. Ooh, y'all are way better in my AP class. They didn't want to say it. Good. Now, check this out. If you take a monosaccharide, and you take another monosaccharide, and you attach them together,
Disaccharide.
that's a disaccharide.
Nice.
Isn't sucrose a disaccharide?
Sucrose is a disaccharide. Sucrose is the white sugar, it's table sugar that you put on your cereal or whatever. Sucrose. There's another type of disaccharide called lactose. That's the sugar that's found in milk. Some people are lactose intolerant. That means if they get this lactose sugar inside their body, they can't digest it. It ends up going through their body completely and causing really bad gas. Some people get gas so bad that it kills them. Yeah, you can die from being lactose intolerant if you're really bad lactose intolerant.
I'm a friend of mine.
A rough way to go. There's another one called maltose. If you've ever heard of malted
I
milk.
don't want to be around you.
Maltose. And basically what it is, it's a glucose. Check this out. A single ring
A little bit better.
connected to another single ring, but in this case, the single ring is a pentagon instead of a hexagon, and we call that fructose. So if you take a glucose and a fructose and you hook them together,
You get sucrose.
you got sucrose, which is a disaccharide.
Get you some of that.
Why do these C's over here,
Don't worry about
the
it.
sucrose only have 3?
Which
Coming
one?
off them? Like the C at the bottom?
This one? This one?
Just a second.
You know what? They screwed up there.
It is.
They should have drawn another bond. That's a good idea. It does have another bond. They didn't draw it.
3 of them only have.
Yeah, they messed up. There's another hydrogen hanging off of there.
I don't know.
Good work there.
Look at on the other one too.
Here we go. Watch this. Watch this reaction happen. A little video footage.
Yeah.
Video footage of joining up molecules.
I'm doing video footage of this video footage.
Here we go.
Zoom in.
It is zoomed in.
All the way.
A molecule of glucose may covalently bond to a molecule of fructose to form sucrose, a disaccharide. Water is also a product of condensation reaction.
H2O.
So what happened was,
Gatorade.
check this out. This molecule comes up here and hooks onto this other molecule,
What the heck just happened?
and it releases water. That is a chemical reaction.
And then
We
share.
start with 2 things, we end up with 2 different things, water and sucrose. We start with glucose and fructose,
Yep.
and we end up with water and sucrose.
That's so awesome.
That's a chemical reaction.
That's pretty cool.
Joining 2 molecules together to make a bigger molecule. This is how plants make sugar. Have you ever heard of sugar cane? It's one common plant that will make sucrose. And it just links these things together inside the plant.
There's a lot of sugar cane down on Lake Okeechobee.
Oh yeah?
Yeah.
Where is it?
Middle Florida.
Now,
Not a gator. So.
check this out, if you take a monosaccharide
A little bit more stuff.
and you hook on another monosaccharide, click, and then another one, click, and another one,
Quadsaccharide.
A
click,
whole
So,
size.
5, 8,
click,
7.
click, It makes some big molecule with lots and lots of monosaccharides hooked together. We call that a polysaccharide. Poly means many.
Got a map.
There are examples of this in everyday life that you run into.
Me.
One example is called
Me.
starch.
There's starch.
What about?
If you've ever heard of a food that's starchy, like a potato,
Ugh.
if you eat French fries.
No.
Here's a potato. If you cut off a little bit of potato and look at it under a microscope, you'll see these little circular things that look like eggs. Those are called starch grains. And if you look at a starch grain up close, if you could, we don't even have microscopes good enough to see this structure, but you would see these polysaccharides. You see how it's hexagon after hexagon linked together, and they actually curlicue. They form little curlicues
Wait, how do
of
they know if
hexagons.
they can't see it?
Chemical experiments.
Experiments.
Yeah, it's difficult. It's just very complicated. But
Good
they
thing I
figured
don't
out
eat
that this was the
anything
structure,
potatoes
even though
in
they
it 'cause
couldn't
they're
see it.
unhealthy.
Now here's another type of polysaccharide called cellulose.
Cellulose fibers, right?
Cellulose does form fibers. It's what you're writing on. This paper is made of cellulose, which is found in plants. The cell walls of plants. If you look under a microscope at a leaf, you can see leaf cells.
Why can't I write on leaves?
You could if you flattened them out and bleached them. That's exactly what paper is. Flattened out, bleached plant cell walls. They usually don't use leaves. They use tree bark and wood.
Oh.
But it's the same stuff.
Genius.
So check this out. If you look at the cell wall here, under a microscope, you see the little fibers there? And if you take one of these fibers up close, you can see it's actually these hexagons linked together in a chain. And that's what cellulose is. And so, all the paper, all the wood, and anything, leaves, there's a lot of cellulose in those. And it's basically these things that are linked together. Now if you eat, let's go back to the potato, because we often eat potatoes. If you eat a potato or French fries or whatever, these big molecules are broken up in your digestive system into individual monosaccharides, sugars, that leak into your bloodstream after you eat, and now you have sugar in your blood. Now, an interesting note here, if you put that or that on your tongue, it tastes sweet. But if you put this large molecule on your tongue, you don't get the sweet taste, you get the taste like potato. But it's the same molecules. A potato is actually sugar molecules just linked together. You don't get the sweet taste, but when it gets down in your intestines and it's digested, it's the same stuff. If you eat straight sugar, just pour a bunch of sugar on your cereal, and you know how it gets in the milk and then dissolves and it goes down there on the bottom, and then you just spoon it out, just pure sugar.
Oh,
That's the same as eating a French fry. It doesn't taste the same, but after it gets down in your stomach and it's digested, it's the same stuff. It's these hexagons. Do you see? Isn't that interesting? Do you want to see a stupid video?
I want to see
Yeah.
some video.
It's stupid.
I'm ready for stupid.
Okay, here we go. You're going to
I
get
don't want to see a stupid video.
Too late.
I'm not looking.
And now, ladies and gentlemen, the lovely Miss Laura, wearing an elegant day and evening ensemble.
Miss Lorelai, that is one stunning garment. Naturally. Naturally? Yes, naturally. It's made from a plant. But it looks like rayon. It is. Rayon is is made from cellulose, which comes from plants.
Cellulose? I had no idea.
Plant cells are supported by cell walls made of cellulose. It's a natural adaptation to the rigors of surviving on our planet.
Or in the fashion business.
It's that durability and natural beauty that makes this garment, and me, possible. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have to get into my next plan.
Miss Lorelai, if I may...
Huh.
Wow. Probably the worst video.
You're right. I told you it was stupid, but you wouldn't listen.
I didn't want to watch it.
I'm ready for it.
Okay, so that's carbohydrates. Questions about these? Monosaccharide, disaccharide, polysaccharide. And by the way, earlier I skipped a couple of words that you might want to know. We call any large molecule like this, that's made up of smaller pieces, we call it a polymer. Poly means many. So a polymer is a big molecule made up of smaller pieces. And a polysaccharide is an example of a polymer. I'll show you some other polymers like proteins and nucleic acids that are also made up of many little pieces. There's a little piece hooked together with other pieces. The little pieces that make up a polymer are called monomers. So there's two words you have to know. Monomer. Monomer means little piece. And polymer means big molecule. And those are just very general terms. They don't apply to any one specific thing. They're general terms for big molecules. And the little pieces are called monomers, and the big molecules are called polymers. So this is an example of a polymer. And do you know what that's an example of? A monomer. Very good, Ben. Does that make sense? Y'all with me? Okay, moving right along, let's talk about fats. Fats are molecules that are used by organisms, usually for storage, to store food, often. And they're made up of two different parts. One part is called a glycerol. A glycerol. And a glycerol is a special molecule. You're just going to have to memorize what it looks like. It has 3 carbon atoms. And hooked to each carbon atom, it has 3 OH groups. These OH groups make what's called an alcohol. Anything that has OH stuck to the edge of it is called an alcohol. And that's where the "all" comes from. You've probably heard of ethanol before. Ethanol, they put it in gasoline, and it's also what's in an alcoholic beverage. Y'all know all about those, I'm sure. Ethanol is it's very simple alcohol. Glycerol is a little more complex. 3 carbons and 3 OH groups, and then some hydrogen sticking off. And I'm going to represent this glycerol molecule like this. Looks like the letter E. 3 carbons and 3 OH groups.
Those are used.
And if they have it turned sideways, where the 3 OH groups are sticking off like this, but it can go in any direction.
But that's
But aren't there 5
not the same
hydrogens?
thing at all.
Yes, I didn't draw the other hydrogens on this.
Why not?
Is that okay? Just because it gets too confusing.
Oh, I get it now. I thought they were used.
See the 3 carbons?
Yeah. They
With
look like
3
used.
OHs sticking off. And when I turn it like that, it does look like U.
Look like U's and E's.
But I can't turn this over because it's written on it.
Yeah.
Make sense now?
Yeah.
Are y'all with me?
Absolutely.
Jay, how you doing back there?
Pretty good.
So you alright?
Tired?
So this is glycerol.
Want done that?
And connected to a glycerol are these fatty acid chains. We call these things fatty acid chains. And what they are lines of carbon, carbon after carbon after carbon in a long line. And here they have the same thing, but this thing's turned sideways. A bunch of carbon atoms and hydrogen sticking off of the carbon atoms. And then on the very end of it is what we call an acid group. That COOH is an acid group. So we call the whole thing a fatty acid. That's a fatty acid chain. So watch what I do here. I'm going to make a fat. You ready? I'm going to take a glycerol
Give me a good
and
fat
connect
fat.
1, 2, 3 fatty acid chains to the glycerol. You know what we call that? You may have heard of it before.
What do we call that?
Graham, have you heard of this before? It's called a triglyceride.
Ah.
Tri meaning 3. Glycer meaning the glycerol portion. A triglyceride is a glycerol and 3 fatty acid chains, and that's what a fat molecule is.
Yeah.
And those things sit underneath your skin and store food for you. What the fatty acids actually are these molecules. If you were to, remember these molecules are rings of carbon. If you were to unhook the carbon ring and straighten that sucker out, you got one of these fatty acid chains. Unhook it, straighten it out, and then stick it onto a glycerol, and you have the beginnings of a fat. So one of these molecules can store several of these molecules. The bodies of organisms have ways of taking these rings and straightening them out and hooking them together onto another molecule.
Can you have a diglyceride, or do you have to have 3?
You can if there's only 2 of these. I've never heard it called diglyceride, but that's what you're talking about.
Yeah.
You could only. There are molecules with only 2 of these hooked up. I'll show you some of them.
So you don't have to have 3.
You don't have to have 3. Some fats only have 1.
What does a good fat have?
Well, I'll show you the good fats and bad fats in just a second. All right. This is it right here.
Diets don't work.
There, you've probably heard of saturated versus unsaturated fats. What we're talking about, when we say saturated, what we're talking about is the amount of hydrogens connected to the carbons. Here's a saturated fat on the bottom. It's this long chain of carbons, and if you notice, every carbon has hydrogens. As many hydrogens as there is possible to attach to these carbons are attached. So we say that the carbon molecule is saturated with hydrogens. Saturated means full. So this carbon molecule is full of hydrogens. Don't worry about this last acid group right here. Every other one is full of hydrogen, so that's a saturated fatty acid.
And the top, everyone's full too.
In the top here, they're not all full.
Yeah.
This carbon right here only has 1 hydrogen attached. There could be another hydrogen right there, but it's not there because this carbon's forming a double bond with this carbon. So this is called an unsaturated fatty acid.
It's like corn.
And unsaturated fatty acids usually have weird shapes. Wherever you see the double bond, usually makes the molecule bend. There's one little double bond here, and it causes a bend. And if you take a look at what these things look like, here's a saturated fat where all the fatty acid chains are completely straight. Here's an unsaturated fat where the fatty acid molecules are bent. You see? Because of double bonds.
Is that a branching bond?
Branching bond. I don't know what that is.
Yeah.
A branching molecule?
Yeah.
Yeah, it is a branching molecule.
Yeah. Better back it up.
So, usually unsaturated fats are liquids, and saturated fats are solids. And the reason for this is because saturated fats can kind of stack on top of one another and make a real dense structure. And that's what butter is. Butter is a saturated fat. You see how it's nice and it looks like rectangular? You could take one of these and stack another one right on top of that, and stack another one right on top of that, and make something that's dense.
Is that how?
That's solid fat, like butter.
So that's how people like get fat from saturated fat. They just get
Well,
fat
yeah, if
from
you eat a lot of saturated fats, then you have these really dense molecules that store a lot of food, and that's bad for you. If you eat unsaturated fats, then they're liquids like oils, and they don't stack up very well, and so it's less dense, and it's in liquid form. So oils are unsaturated fats.
Walrus.
What?
Yes,
A walrus has really a lot of really thick fat under its skin, and that helps insulate it, helps keep heat in. Insulated against cold Arctic waters where it swims around.
They're so cute.
They say the fat under the skin of walruses is about the thickness of a car tire.
What?
Oh.
The density of a car tire. It's real thick, hard fat.
They fight through
Oh.
You can buy through that.
Yeah.
Hey, bro,
Yes,
the little battery
that.
things.
Michael Allen?
the battery's beeping.
It's on red.
Okay, we'll see how much we can get out of it. Actually, we're about to stop it anyway, so we're okay. All right, so we've learned 2 types of molecules today: carbohydrates and lipids. And you have to be able to identify these things by sight. And that's what we're going to work on next. So I'm going to give a handout here, and we're going to go through this, each of us. You can go ahead and turn it off. Thank you.
Are we doing this now?
We're doing this now, together. Make sure you